The president ascended to 16 constitutional amendment bill recently, and with some very interesting amendments there, as most political observers like you would have noted. Now, state assemblies and judiciary would now get financial autonomy. Hopefully, we can begin to see a semblance of democracy at the state level as we get the opportunity to criticize at the center. And of course, the president in that provision is now mandating the president-elect, whoever that is, in the future to appoint his ministers within 60 days. What's your impression of this new amendment?
Political evolution is happening, Sunday. We are evolving. I said somewhere that some of the improvement factors in our evolving polity will be mistakes, missteps, and some critical happenings in our polity. Interestingly, these bills had been in the legislature for a while. It has to pass through, provisions of the specifically Section 9, subsection 1 and 2 of the Constitution. It provides for amendment of the Constitution. So it was at the end of the day, it passed through the legislative process, and it was sent to the president for accent in January this year. It's coming at the twilight of the administration of possibly the person that have triggered the necessity for some of the provisions of this amendment of the Constitution, particularly mandating the president, or the president-elect, as the case may be, to present members of his Federal Executive Council for nominees for screening at the National Assembly. I think it's a takeout of what happened in 2015 when President Buhari came, into power, and it took ages. It almost looked like forever before we had a Federal Executive Council. I think that those are in that particular instance is a step taken to address that issue. Okay,
do you think that step, that's before Stella comes on, was far-reaching? I know there were arguments also around not just presenting vague names, like because you expect ministers from every state, you basically just line up 36 persons, or as we have with other government, one from every region, pushing it to about 42. Should it have gone further to begin to say, submit names with specific qualifications, with a bit of profile and designation, what the possible designation will be in your government, so that when questionings are done, rather than the vague, broad questionings that we see, or the take-a-bow kind of questionings that we see, we would have been able to drill down on what the antecedents of these persons are, as well as whether they have an understanding of the responsibility that they have been nominated for. Do you think this constitution amendment should have further specify this kind of reforms?
Yeah, it could have done. It could have been better if it had come, maybe use the word distilled further, the maybe requirements or the parameters for that. But I think because we are still evolving, a very critical step has been taken that will force the hand of the president to take action within 60 days. The provision of the Constitution that says every state must have representation at the Federal Executive Council, germane important, is in the interest of national unity, is the interest of the federal character, to address our diversity and all that. And I must say, Nigeria is so blessed that each and every region, each and every state, is blessed with people of quality, in various spheres of life and endeavors that will fit into any kind of role that is required to provide service at that level. However, I think there are other ways that this can be dealt with. The National Assembly can come within their internal rules to make provisions for this, to also demonstrate that they are a legislature that makes sense, a legislature that addresses critical issues and not just rubber stamps. They should demonstrate by their internal rules, either by improving their internal rules or whatever, to say, Mr. President, as you are submitting these names, we would like to have that, this, and that. That will help guide our process better, to refine it. However, if I would take a little bit of time to sit on the other side of maybe a president, by the grace of God, to say, why should I tell you ab initio, considering the state of our polity today? In the United States of America, maybe yes. But here, possibly if a president submits a name or a list of names, having addressed the 36 states and federal capital territory matter, and says this is going to help the ab initio, it creates chaos, because now you will have agitation within the framework of juicy ministries and not so juicy ministries, and that will now constitute another logjam within the negotiation process to say, Mr. President, the Minister of Petroleum should come from our zone and all that. Maybe that is part of the problem. But then it is what it is. A president that has the political will take a position and say, these are the potential roles. We can go as far as saying 1 or 2 possible roles for each person without narrowing it down to a singular position. But indeed, I agree. The process of screening nominees should be distilled and refined for us to get the best out of these nominees when they are being screened, to know that they have the capacity to deliver. Indeed, we have people that have excelled in their various spheres of endeavor, but by virtue of possibly some weaknesses with regards to what we call in human resource, moving from specialist to generalist role, which all the members of the Federal Executive Council are at what you call a generalist role from a strategic perspective. They don't have to be at the specialist role because they've gone beyond that. The specialists are down the radar from the PAMSECs and directors. But indeed, the leadership quality at the generalist role is critical. You will have somebody that is at the top echelon of his profession, but he's sent to another ministry and very big gap emerges in terms of how that person delivers. So I agree that it should be further distilled, but it doesn't have to be at the constitutional level. The National Assembly should be able to refine that. Also, the president will have the prerogative, the incoming president, to decide to play it differently in how he presents to the National Assembly.
I think one of the things the bill has done is the fact that once you win election, you don't go and rest. You start working immediately, because if you are expected to submit this name in 2 months, it therefore means that the day you're returned, you start working on that. But going forward, State Assembly, do you think they want this autonomy? And I ask because they always go to the state government, cap in hand, and in some states, the State Assembly is almost like one of the agencies of the state government. It's not an independent body. And if you look at the autonomy that was given to local government, and to what extent, so I'm wondering, is the State Assembly prepared for this autonomy, and is it really going to change things at that level?
Thank you for that question. I like it. First of all, I answer for them to say yes, they want it, because they are suffering from a dependency syndrome. That is why they are always going cap in hand. A dependency syndrome that is created. No, yes, because it's a situation they found themselves over time. How many years have we been in and out of democracy, and for the past 23 years block period, it has been like that. So that is why I use the psychological term of dependency syndrome. But if, as individuals, as a speaker of a state assembly, much as they wield that power, or they have that, we know that sometimes they are being picked by the governor, they would like to have the control to exercise it as they wish. And we still believe there are good people that want to deliver dividend of democracy within the state legislature. So this is a good one. Even if they don't want it, it's there. Then that will now show us whether or not they want it. But I think financial autonomy gives what? Independence. And with independence comes confidence and comes demonstration of capacity or otherwise. So that is a very important thing. And in line with the principle of devolution of powers and true federalism, which is one of the objectives, of bringing about this particular amendment, it is good for democracy for us to see. But then that goes to the next question you asked. What happened to the local government autonomy? So what I also foresee is, much as it's a good provision, it is also the result will be a factor of the political will of the governors to ensure that is done. Because in terms, taking it from what you said about the local government, I don't foresee the governors wanting that financial autonomy, because one of the reasons why the governors of the states of the Federal Republic of Nigeria are amongst the most, if not the most powerful governors in the world, is because of the absolute power they wield at the state level with regards to the controls of those, units of governance that they should have control for us to have that balance and that control. They probate and reprobate, and that they won't want to let go. But political will is what will drive that for us moving forward. But so first of all, the superstructure and the structure, the framework must be right, and this provision, that has been brought in the amendment is germane, is fantastic. What remains to be seen is execution, and how that execution will be enforced. I believe the political will of the incoming president will play a critical role for this to simmer down. Because interestingly, taking what's out of your words, so sorry, we go forward to the issue of the giving the powers to the states to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity, and all those provisions that are fantastic. But at execution level, like is the recurring common denominator issue that have bedeviled the progress of Nigeria, is at that state level how the players act. And that is why I keep on saying, much as we have issue with the presidents of Nigeria successively, the chunk of the blame of the bane of our democracy is actually not the president. I dare say it is those governors that have been shackling us back, because they have been given the money to execute. They have the levers of governance to deliver, but they have consistently, majority of them, failed, and with no consequences.
Interesting perspective there you're offering. Still staying with some of those far-reaching recommendations. You talked about power.
Yeah.
You talked about railway. So it is one thing to devolve this power, but the kind of investment that some of these infrastructures require, do you see that as something within the realms of some of this state government, laudable as the idea may be?
Oh, fantastic. Very well. That will bring about the capacity, the precipitate, the kind of quality of leaders we have at that level, which has been a critical failure factor in the general progressiveness of our national polity. The governors, most of them have not really, delivered, because either they have the capacity but they don't have the political will, or vice versa. A state of like Lagos, let's take Lagos as a model, for example, has demonstrated the ability and the capacity to do so. The current president-elect, the president-elect, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, ran his state for years without even the national subvention. A lot of the developmental, strides in Lagos were done and delivered using the PPP model, right? So it depends on the foresight, the vision, and the capacity of the governors. The opportunity has been given to them, and we are moving towards true federalism. If we go back to the First Republic, for example, the late sage Awolowo, Ahmadu Bello, and the likes of the governor of the Eastern region and all that, we are delivering dividends of democracy. We are driving the regions in line with their visions, and we could see we are still counting success of democracy, referring to projects that were done in the First Republic. So this is germane. The states will have capacity. After all, they are doing it by what? By busy collecting loans left, right, and center, rather than being innovative and creative to drive the state. So these are far-reaching, fantastic provisions, amendments of the Constitution. What remains to be seen is if the governors in this case will be able to seize the moment, if you like, and provide development for their states in line with the peculiarities of the state. I expect the new set of governors, whether returning or new, to demonstrate the knowledge of the peculiarity of their states in terms of strengths and in terms of weaknesses, to see how they can harness those strengths to make the states better moving forward.
All right. Another alteration to the bill was the renaming of the Nigerian prison to the Correctional Service. Before now, for over a year now, we've been referring to it as the Nigeria Correctional Service. But has there been any difference, or is this just the name?
I think if you ask me, this is one of those things you can call in administration corrective actions taken, or no, not corrective action, normalizing a situation or formalizing a situation, as the case may be. You know, it's just, for me, semantics. It's just changing of name as far as I'm concerned, maybe to reflect or to change that perception, to manage our perceptions from that prison, quote and unquote, word to correctional facility, which is okay. You know, I don't see any. We saw the provisions. I saw it. There is nothing that has to do with the mechanics of how that entity is driven or how it is run. It is even not going to change the size of the budget anyway.
One critical part I would like you to speak to before we bring this conversation to a halt is the place of active citizenry in all of the things that we aspire for. We've talked about how this would afford us the opportunity to see whether these governors understand the potentials that are inherent in these amendments. But also more critical, it's an active citizenry. What the average Arab, the average Westerner would not take sitting down. We sort of swallow, and if they push us back, we break the wall and continue to move back. At what point would we begin to see the kind of citizenry that would say, this is the provision of the Constitution, and we demand that you provide us this quality of leadership beyond just taking part in elections and afterwards going back to our business and returning another 4 years?
That's a tough one. Sunday and Stella, I'm sorry to sound very negative, but parochialism is deeply rooted in Nigeria. You know, parochialism along the line of ethnicity, religious sentiments, and a lot of factors that will continue to remain the dividing factors for Nigerians. You see, active citizenry, the impact of active citizenry is a function of how united the activism is. You know, if the activism is not pointed, is not well articulated, is not sustained, it will end up like what I call the Andrew Liversole syndrome. You know, so activism from the point of view of pressuring government to deliver in line with Constitution or in line with promise is a function of a united objective, united from with a view to pressuring. When you the models you are talking about, if you look at the demography of those entities, if you look at the cultural setup of those entities, they are different from ours. Nigeria is a complex society. So if, for example, we see it happening even in the case of fighting corruption. Somebody can steal from here to Jericho, from here to the end of time. The moment somebody wants to arrest an authority, people from that person's region, or people from that person's religion, or people from that person's state will come and carry placard and say, the person has done nothing, leave him alone. This is how bad parochialism is.
I keep wondering, is it a psychological problem?
It is a societal ill. The erosion of our value system. And then what complicates is this polarization along this line. But it is also talking about the corruption of our mind and the erosion of our value system. Because if you go back 150 years ago, you go to northern Nigeria, there are people of Igbo extraction that have been there, commingling, cohabiting, doing business peacefully, and vice versa. You go to Lagos, you go to Anambra, you go everywhere, right? And people are there. If you go to, I'm from Kano, they go to places like Sabongari and all that. And people have even assimilated from Sabongari to other parts of the town or the city, even within what you call the core of the city. You know, but you have places like Ongwondo Power and all that, which reflects that it is a settlement of people that came, you know, to stay there and to grow. You know, that over time changed with the emergence of colonialism, with the emergence of post-colonialism, of this political class using these levers. Why are they using it? Because the people have become sucked into that. You know, driven by religion, the bad side of the religion in terms of bad religious leaders, and also the political actors. But as individuals also, we have become that sentimental and is deeply rooted. So that is why the activism we are talking about may not play out that way. However, political consciousness, as we are evolving, may be the stabilizing factor to be able to push and pressure. But the advice to the people now is for us to be more tactical, you know, in driving this and ensuring we start making the baby steps to the big steps. What do I mean? At state level, I want to see that activism at state level. Now addressing these governance issues of governors sitting pretty and doing nothing for 8 years, and fingers are being pointed at the center because they have all it takes to deliver. So at state level, at least the parochialism is there, because if you look at some states, I don't want to mention states, it's deeply seated.
That's right.
You know, even when you say it is the zone of this, it is the time of this zone to bring a governor is an issue. You know, so but then it is easier to pressure the governors to deliver. And when governors deliver, as to my mind, about 50% of our developmental strides will be achieved.
Interesting perspective. We can sit here all day and talk about the Nigerian problem.
Yes.
And it will not be enough. But it's clearly, as articulated by our guests, we need a unity of purpose. We must upscale our thirst for national development above parochial interest. That's the summation of what Baba Yusuf has told us this morning. I want to thank you for always finding time to be with us. And we look forward to having you as often as possible continue to preach the Nigerian message. And hopefully Sunday we will look back and say, this was my contribution to nation building.
That's the whole idea, Sunday. And thank you very much for the platform, for the opportunity. Thank you, Stella.
Welcome.
And thank you, viewers, for listening in.